I always like to start out by saying I'm a recovering CIA officer. If you all that were here this morning, I do go to weekly meetings, Agency Anonymous, so I'm getting there. I was a decorated CIA officer. That part of that is in the book, which we fought to get out. Initially, they told me I could never say I worked there. We fought them and we beat them on that one, and we got some things in the book eventually. I went on deadly assignments for my agency and my country. I loved my country. I was very dedicated to the agency. Some of those assignments, they told us we may not come back from. No problem. That's what we did. But the higher I got up in the agency, the more I began to see illegal, unconstitutional, sometimes criminal activity that the agency and some other sectors of the shadow government, I call it, were doing things that were illegal and unconstitutional. And I always have to say this: the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. It supersedes every other law in the U.S. criminal justice system and the judicial branch. That's worth remembering. When the U.S. government violates the Constitution, they are committing multiple felonies based on the foundation of our government. We must always remember that. So, as a federal agent, I had to swear an oath to the Constitution to defend the Constitution and our country against enemies, foreign and domestic. The problem was there were some that were domestic, and there were some that happened to be in our own government. So I had to make a decision. Was I going to uphold my oath to the Constitution, or was I going to shrink back? And for me, it was an easy choice. I chose to stand for the Constitution, and that's why I'm here this evening. We have to. It's because we have been so busy with our lives, just trying to survive, that they've been able to get away with doing what they've done. This is a wake-up call. This is an alert. This whole conference and the one that's subsequently going to come after this is a wake-up call. It is almost too late to stop what is now a post-constitutional government. The people are no longer ruling in our country. The government, in a tyrannical form, is now ruling the people by subversion, force, and fear. Sadly, that's what we have today. The reason I am here is the question is always asked, where are the whistleblowers? If there is a covert geoengineering program, why aren't people coming out and blowing the whistle on it if it's so dangerous? The NSA surveillance program, if it wasn't for Edward Snowden, who both the Democratic and Republican Party have come out publicly and said they want him assassinated. If it wasn't for Edward Snowden, would we know about the NSA spying program that was collecting 1.5 billion pieces of information on you and me and our telephones and our internet communications, our emails? That's what they were doing, not on terrorists, on us. And they were storing it in the Utah data center, which is still there forever. So if there's something you do later on that they're not real happy with, they've got your emails, your text, your cell phone conversations, and everything's still stored in the database. And all that stuff, by the way, is still there on you, not on terrorists. Every single American citizen. So this is what we have here. We have a government that is functioning outside the Constitution. This is the size of the secret government. I call it the shadow government. There are some people call it the deep state. Take your pick. Same thing. We've got the CIA, functions covert programs. They're probably the most out of control because their charter is so loose. The IRS has covert programs. FBI, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Department of Justice, the NSA, and I have added the National Weather Service and NOAA, because as Dane, I think, told you, the National Weather Service and NOAA are now binding their employees with secrecy agreements so they cannot talk without penalty of prison about some of these climate programs that they're doing. That's called a red flag. That's what we're facing. Here is the first whistleblower. John F. Kennedy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. One of the greatest speeches ever given in terms of the Constitution. And there is a very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That was a prophetic message by John F. Kennedy, April 27, 1961. We all know what happened to him in 1963, don't we? They had identified, John F. Kennedy and Robert had identified mafia connections within the CIA. There was an assassination program. They engaged in the Bay of Pigs without his knowledge. He had come out publicly and said he was going to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces and dismantle it. And then in 1963, we saw what happened. 9/11, we don't have time to go into that. I just want to say this. I teach criminal investigations at a university. 9/11 was immediately labeled a terrorist event, and there was a reason for that. When you label it a terrorist event, it stops any sort of criminal investigation right in its tracks. If they would have done a criminal investigation of 9/11, it would have uncovered things that would have painted a whole different picture about why those buildings came down. I would encourage you to, Architects and Engineers for Truth have done an outstanding video about Tower 7. Tower 7 was not hit by a plane, and it came down under controlled definition. Now, I'm a former CIA analyst, and I'm saying that based on a whole lot of research. That was not done by a plane. And just finally, when the towers came down, hundreds of tons of metal, steel, marble, and concrete turned to dust before it hit the ground. So much so that there was almost no seismic activity when the buildings hit the ground. It was all dust. You can see steel girders as they come down, if any of you seen that, literally vaporize and turn to dust as they fall down. That is not natural. All we're going to say there. I recommend you look into a criminal investigation of 9/11 and get past the terrorist narrative, which has been a favorite one for decades. Where are the whistleblowers? I come from the belly of the beast. I was an interviewer, interrogator. I was a counterintelligence agent. I was a polygraph examiner. I was an internal investigator, and I was on and on and on. And so I know this system, and I know it well, and then I experienced it personally. Why don't people come out in these secret programs that they know are illegal and unconstitutional? Why don't they come out and blow the whistle and tell people what's going on? Well, this is why. The U.S. government, every secret operational program that it has, forces the employee or coerces the employee, the person, into signing what is called a secrecy agreement, non-disclosure agreement. Now, back in the original days, the secrecy agreement was created to protect legitimate sources and methods, military technology and things like that. That was okay. That was fine. The secrecy agreement protected us when we went out in the field, because if they found out who we were, we wouldn't just be killed, we would have been tortured. So it protected our identities, protects the identities of troops in the field doing movements out during wartime. That's how it started. But it's been taken and it's been turned into a monster where the secrecy agreement is now being used as the ultimate tool of intimidation. Every employee that gets a job and obtains knowledge of these covert programs, the Air Force geoengineering program, in my opinion, has to sign this agreement. What the agreement says is, if you disclose anything that you know about this program, you can be terminated or you can force criminal penalties. In other words, you can be put in prison. Good friend, we hope will be speaking at our next event, was put in prison by the CIA for 2 years. That he exposed the torture program, which was a lot more than waterboarding, folks. As a matter of fact, they got almost nothing out of waterboarding. People died. It was bad. Anyway, he came out publicly, talked about the torture program, made one mistake, one wrong word. They convicted him, John Kirikow, and they put him in prison for 2 years. Modern-day hero. Just got out. So served 2 years for coming out and trying to alert people about what was going on. I was talking to somebody in the back. I have to watch every single word I say because they are just waiting for one thing. And so it's a constant screen. You don't want to give them any ammunition to put in their gun. So there's binding power, penalties, and threats for the secrecy agreement. That stops 99% of the people right there. Oh man, I'm not going there. I'll just look the other way. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want my life destroyed. Now, there is a massive, mammoth, complex, secret mechanism in the U.S. government. It's called the intelligence community. It is so powerful that not even the Congress or the Senate can control it. Matter of fact, it controls them. It does whatever it wants. They have these Senate investigations, and they'll come and they say, sorry, Senator, we can't tell you what we're doing because you don't have the agency clearance. And that's where it's shut down. Benghazi is an example. The NSA surveillance program is an example. Where did those go? Nowhere. I sit on the Citizens Commission of Benghazi, and that's a whole other story, maybe the next conference. Anyway, It began in 1948. I talk about this in the book real quickly. An Air Force B-2 bomber had 4 RCA civilian engineers on board. The plane went down in a horrible accident. A couple of the pilots parachuted out. All 4 engineers were killed in a horrible crash. The widows of the engineers demanded to know from the Air Force why the plane crashed and why their husbands died. The Air Force came back and said, well, we can't tell you that because it's secret. Turns out it was gross negligence on behalf of the pilot. Drove the plane into the ground. Hit the wrong flaps, hit the thruster instead of the opposite, and literally drove that bomber right into the farmland. I've been to the site. I have pictures of it in the book. So the families pushed it and said, no, it wasn't classified. You can't do that. We're suing you for the death of our husbands. So the United States government, the executive branch, created what's called the state's secrets privilege. The state's secrets privilege was literally, the wording was derived from the monarchy of the King of England, which gave the King of England absolute power to shut down any case they deemed was unacceptable. Just shut it down. The state secrets privilege was used to shut down these 4 widows' case. It was shut down. It was sealed in federal court so that no one, including Congress, the Senate, and their attorneys, would ever see it. That's where this all began in 1948. And it's gotten far worse from there. People who have been made sick, or their family or anyone else, they have lost all their rights to due process. They're not told that. I found that out the hard way when I tried to sue the government, and they came back and said, sorry, pal, you don't have any rights. So I took a different course, which I'll tell you about here in a moment. So that's how they shut them up, too. There is within each federal agency, now remember, since 1948, this procedure has been perfected. It is a science to destroy a whistleblower from the very beginning. They come to a supervisor. They may even have the courage to call their congressman or senator about this illegal operation. And the first thing that happens is they start getting promotions denied, even though they're top performers. Their promotions are denied. They're given embarrassing assignments where they're put in the corner of a building somewhere so that everybody knows that they're being penalized for this. If they continue to blow the whistle and push it even farther, they'll do things like this. I have seen this personally. They'll raise the interest rates on the credit union loans so that their cars and other loans are unaffordable. If they try to pull out their retirement funds to provide for their family, and especially in the case where they've been driven out of the organization will block their retirement funds so the family will be destroyed financially. Now that is a felony. For a federal agency to deny the retirement funds of an employee is a felony. I've seen them do that. And it was an interesting case. They will do that. Now, another thing that they will do, just so you all know this, and I want the public to know this too, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, we can see that you're very stressed out by all this, and we want to help you. So we're going to refer you to the Office of Medical Services so you can undergo some psychological counseling to help you sleep at night and make you better and get rid of your anxiety. So we're going to set up an appointment for you to meet with a psychologist. Now, where do you suppose that goes? The interview's over, the document is falsified, employee is paranoid, obsessive, compulsive, and disgruntled. That goes in the file, so if it ever does get to the Congress or Senate or court, they pull out and say, well, look, he or she went under an evaluation and they're basically unstable, end of story, shut the case down. Part of an intentional process. It is a campaign. Inspector generals, you guys, you know that every federal agency has an IG, an inspector general, right? They're created, supposedly, to oversee that agency and keep it out of criminal activity, right? Well, wrong. A lot of inspector generals, now I have to give some kudos to the state IG because they helped me expose one particular operation. My agency's IG, I submitted a 15-page complex documented report documenting my family was exposed to toxins. My wife was bleeding out of her gums. She was bruising all over her body. She had lost her short-term memory. She was on morphine because of severe headaches because of the toxins they didn't want people to know about that she was being exposed to. That's what they didn't want people to know. So I submitted this document to the IG. Look, I did secret tests. I ran samples out to certain reputable universities. I secretly flew my son out for medical evaluation with a well-known immunologist. I got it all back, put it all together, went into their desk, laid it on there and said, tell me there's no toxins on this base. So they got the IG involved. We go into the big meeting with the IG, and I said, bring out my investigation, my report. Oh, well, we don't know where it is. Now, I've been told by other officers that the roof was being raised off headquarters because of this case. Reporters were calling from all over the place trying to get information. The headquarters was freaking out. They knew darn well what this case was. So I pressed them. I had my two courageous attorneys there, Clint Blackman and George Hardy. And I always say this, God bless you guys. I love you, man. They had courage, and I hope someday they get the credit for that. But we got the IG finally to pull out my investigative report that had all this evidence in it. What did we get? We got a one-page document written in someone else's handwriting that said that there was no problem at all, and their investigation had revealed nothing. So, are IGs always objective and honest? If they have interest in that organization, I can tell you right now, no. Should be, but they're not. Because of all of this, within these federal agencies, the NSA, the CIA, the DI, any agency that, especially the covert agencies that engage in nefarious operational programs, there is a culture of fear. You guys out there that still work there know what I'm talking about. Everyone, I used to call it the paranoia palace. Everybody inside there is afraid of saying anything because they know about this system. They will destroy you. They'll destroy your career. They'll destroy your finances. They'll destroy your family. They'll take you all the way down as far as they can, even from the outside. You remember Gary Webb, who exposed the CIA drug running operation down in Central America? Anybody know about that out there? Gary Webb eventually was driven to suicide. Remember that? Did anybody see the movie? Yeah, you see the movie. They destroyed his career, his reputation, his life, his family, and then he was found dead of a gunshot wound in a hotel room. The perfect crime. Drive him to suicide, and there's no culpability, and your problem is gone. Frank Olson jumped out of the CIA LSD program, jumped out of I think it was a 6-story window of a hotel room, committed suicide because he had found out that the CIA was drugging people with LSD without their knowledge. What a coincidence. Frank commits suicide. John F. Kennedy again. How far will they go? Will they go that far? I think we all know the answer to that. And in a constitutional government, that's alarming, at the very least. Now, they tell us, 2012, the Congress and the Senate came out with, we're going to take care of this. Whistleblowers being at risk and their lives being destroyed, their careers being destroyed. So we're going to pass the 2012 Whistleblower Protection Act, allowing any whistleblower that sees any illegal activity on the part of the government, we're going to protect them so they can come out and report it. Sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds like a good thing. What they don't tell you is if you read down through the act, anybody that has signed a secrecy agreement, is involved in any covert government program, or handles anything classified is not covered by the Whistleblower Protection Act. They have no protection. They are 100% at risk. And there are some that have come out thinking they were protected by this, and they were not. And they were penalized. That's the whole idea. This I talked about the state secrets privilege. These cases are sealed. And no one can see them forever once they're sealed in court. And this was kind of the most disconcerting for me. There are certain major newspapers, of which if I mentioned their name, you would know them. These are national papers that are communicating and directly connected, in this case, to the CIA and in some cases to the NSA. So, if a whistleblower decides, I'm freedom of the press, man, I'm going to the press and I'm going to report to the press this illegal stuff that I've seen. So they call up XYZ national newspaper, and if you do enough checking, you'll find out who that is. I want to tell you my story. I want to tell you what I've seen. In this case, the reporter got right on the phone, contacted the CIA, and told them what this person had just reported for the story. That has been done several times with this paper. They communicate with the CIA regularly regarding what they're going to publish and what they're not going to publish. Chilling. I call this massive structure the shadow government. Another fellow calls it the deep state. Take your pick. But I want to show you how massive this secret government is. Now, this is since 9/11. I can tell you a lot of this was pre-existing 9/11. Most people think that the NSA surveillance program was a result of 9/11. Isn't that what you've been told? The NSA surveillance program existed before 9/11 happened. That's what they're not telling you. 1,271 government organizations involved in secrecy within the United States. 1,931 private companies, large private companies, involved in secrecy in the United States, bound by the secrecy agreement. 10,000 intelligence locations across the United States. Did you get that? 10,000 secret locations, not overseas, not in China, not in Indonesia, not inside the United States. Now, the CIA legally is only supposed to have a foreign charter. Anybody know that? It was forbidden from having any operations within the United States. That was its restraint. That restraint is now gone. 10,000 locations, 4.8 million Americans, and that's just the ones we know of, hold government security clearances and are bound by and threatened by the secrecy agreement to stay silent. Now, the figure's a lot bigger than that, but that's a lot of people and their families and everybody that they're connected to. Do you think they're going to speak up if it means total destruction? Probably not. 854,000 people hold top secret security clearances, which has severe penalties, and there's compartments above that, some of which I had, that have even stricter penalties. But that is the number of people that have top secret security clearances, where they've got the keys to the kingdom, essentially. Each one of these agencies employs the secrecy agreement as a binding tool. Now, it used to be to protect legitimate classified information. It has morphed into a threat. Why do they have to bind people like that? I am a huge proponent of the truth, and I am really, really up against secrecy in a constitutional government unless it's absolutely necessary. Why would the National Weather Service make a weather program secret and make people sign a non-disclosure form? You got to ask that question. The military-industrial complex, tens of thousands of government contractors. The government comes, for example, most people don't know this, the CIA has a technical firm it's created called In-Q-Tel. In-Q-Tel offered, I think it was a $5 million contract to Google. Now, what they do is they come to these companies and they say, hey, we'll give you a contract for $5 million, $20 million, and most companies are thirsty and they're out trying to get contracts to survive. So they'll say, oh, but we'll take the contract. Google took the contract, $5 million contract. They are now joined with the CIA in Q-Tel. What are they doing? They're doing research on trends on the internet and Facebook. They're monitoring the internet is what they're doing. Let me just break that down for you. Now, do you think any of the Google executives can talk about the program? Do you think maybe they made them sign an agreement before they got the $5 million? Yeah. Why don't you hear anything about that? Why isn't Google saying anything about that? Well, that's why. Employees at every level. If you've got big-time Beltway bandit government contractor X that gets a covert agency contract, they are bound to sign the secrecy agreement, and every employee at every level on that contract has to sign the agreement. Secretaries, logistics people, of course the CEOs, people that run the copy machines, all bound by the secrecy agreement. Thousands and thousands of people. You see the number of people that are bound by the government out there? Are you kind of getting that picture? It's a lot, and that's just the ones that we know of. Here's a good quote. The top secret world of government created in response to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 has become so large, so unwieldy, and so secretive that no one knows how much money it costs, how many people it employs, how many programs exist within it, or exactly how many agencies do the same work. And then I italicized the next one. Not even Congress knows the size and the extent of this intelligence secret apparatus. That's why I call it the shadow government. They don't even know how big it is. They don't even know a lot of things that the CIA, especially, and others are even engaged in overseas. Syria is a prime example. This is a separate secret government that operates, and this is the part that really gets to me, it operates outside the Constitution. We are now in a post-constitutional government. It's over as far as the Constitution goes. That's why I'm here. Some of us want to bring that back. And the only way to do it is to stand up against this. And there's risk involved, but we have to do it. Because if we don't, we're going down. Have we created a monster? My gosh. If you knew the size and extent, yes, we have. It's shocking. Now, Dane played this, and I want to emphasize this, because this is more than a smoking gun. When the director of the CIA comes out, anybody know anything about the Council on Foreign Relations? Uh-huh. So you know who he's talking to, don't you? All right, a little global action going on here, all right? But when the director of the CIA comes out and makes a speech, every word is refined, winnowed down, and everything he says means something. Everything. Listen to what he says. Another example is the array of technologies often referred to collectively as geoengineering. Kudos to Dane. They're coming out and they're saying it. That potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change, one that has gained my personal attention. Geoengineering has gained the personal attention of the director of the CIA. That means something. Is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI. Now let me tell you, based on my humble and meek experience, when the CIA comes out and admits something like this, they've been doing it for at least 20 years. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's about to be exposed. Or he wouldn't be saying this. This is beyond a smoking gun. Now, some people will say, you just got that off a conspiracy internet website. I mean, come on. Well, you know where I got this from? CIA.gov, the CIA's own website. They're putting it out there on their website in writing. Now, why would they do that? Unless it's the two things I just talked about. They've been doing it for a while, and the cat's about to come out of the bag. The vax people are going to do such a much better job in this, but I just wanted to mention, because I hate cover-ups, because I lived one, personally. And that's what's happening with the vaccine-autism connection in a big way. Covering up the truth at the expense of young children and their health, and the families that are ruined because of this. So you want to know the connection between autism and vaccines? You know who the first people to ask are? The parents. The ones who saw their child's behavior before the vaccine, and what happened after the vaccine. One of the doctors on Vax said that real medicine is an art, where you listen to the patient and you watch it. That is the absolute, that was a wonderful statement. Only a parent knows what their child was like before that vaccine and what their child was like after the vaccine. And if the doctor was honest and not connected to big pharma and money, he would listen to that parent. And if the CDC really was open to a true investigation, they would conduct studies to find out how this was happening, number one, and number two, how they can possibly treat these children, wouldn't they? Why are they not? Billions of dollars, let's just start with that. Nature of government, that also. There are independent doctors. I know one myself, a big fan of his, has a whole page on autism, brilliantly written. So there are doctors out there that are talking about this stuff. I want to give kudos to the courageous lawyers that are standing up for this stuff. You guys and ladies are in here. Hats off to you, man. That's raw courage. That's the kind of courage we need. And I'm telling you, if there's attorneys watching this, your country is at stake. Your freedom is at stake. This is the final hour. We are coming down to the perfect storm. Put your reputation down and come out and stand with these people and have the guts and the courage to support your Constitution. Because if you don't, we've got maybe half a decade at most before this comes down. So thank you to the attorneys for that. That is true courage. The Vax people will talk about this. The CDC insider that is going to be talking about some of these things. There are some people still out there that have courage. That's what we need today, is that kind of courage. The age of cowardice in the United States, and being caught up in your pension, and being caught up in how much you make, and your next promotion, and your granite countertops, and all of that, those days are gone. We're on the precipice of big danger environmentally and economically. The dollar will collapse. Okay, so what do? I saw this happen to me personally. My wife, and especially my oldest son, were almost terminal. They covered it up. They told me I could never say I worked for the CIA. They told them they could never tell anybody about their case because of the state secrets privilege. What do you do in a case like that? Well, There's only one thing to do. You write an expose. So I wrote From the Company of Shadows. Not for self-glorification, trust me. There was none of it in that. It was one heck of a battle. When the book was written, I'll show you an excerpt. This is one of the excerpts from the book, one of the pages of many. There is nothing classified in this excerpt at all. Nothing. It's talking about Blackout began receiving threatening letters accusing them of security violations and commanding them not to exchange correspondence with our family. And just a system that they used of intimidation is what it's talking about. And they blacked it out. Now, based on an executive order issued by President Ronald Reagan, for the CIA to black information out because of negligence or because of it's embarrassing is illegal. It's criminal to do that. Violation of the Constitution, supreme law of the land. Well, they did. So, here's another excerpt from the book. Now, this talks about what they do to the families. They take away their names. They give them fake names like the Doe family. There's fake names here that are blacked out. They're not even their real names. They're fake names, but they black them out. Because they don't want you to know that they use fake names to cover the identities of innocent mothers and children who have been exposed to serious toxins in a secret government program. This picture that I put in the book has a lot of meaning. I'll explain that to you in a moment. Down at the bottom, Blackout's identities and case facts are hidden in secret. That's not even their name behind that blackout. It's a general term. They didn't want anybody to know that they do this to civilians. Real important. So what did I do? I call this in chapter 25, the tyranny of secrecy. We have a tyrannical government that is now functioning with a huge abuse of secrecy and silencing anybody that will stand against it by classifying everything. This photograph here, when I wrote the book and they blacked these things out, I had a decision to make. What am I going to do about this? I swore an oath to the Constitution. Who's going to win? Government intimidation or the Constitution? Well, it's a painful choice, but it's kind of an easy one. So I built a code into the book. I refer to it as a shadow code. And there are things in it like this. This shadow is the actual shadow of the young man that almost died from this toxic exposure. They didn't know whose shadow that was. They do now. Down here, it says, my family was devastated by our government's abuse of blackout. They don't want you to know how they tried to silence me. They blacked it out. Although it's out there in the public in other places. There's studies this thick written on that thing. So I built a code into the book. It's a numerical code, and it weaves through there. And if you follow the numerical sequence, it opens up what these blackouts actually say and what they use to try to silence our family. Okay? I learned one thing. If you play by their rules, they will destroy you. If you realize that freedom is only in the truth and you come out full bore and just lay it out there, that's probably why I'm still alive today. You go out on the internet and you see things like, I'm surprised this guy's not in a dumpster. Well, I'm still alive because I came out. I have this thing called the Constitution and freedom of speech. I came out full bore and made this stuff public. If you fear them, they have you. That's how they do it. They manipulate the American people through intimidation and fear. Do not fear. If you don't fear the government, you're truly free. So, as I wrap this up, this is a time for courage. As I mentioned, the age of cowardice in the United States or being too busy trying to survive, those days are gone. The environment is collapsing. Our economy is on the verge of collapse. The federal government has programs in place that when the economy does collapse, to take care of civil unrest in a very extreme fashion. Some of you know about that. It's a very serious time. It's a time for courage. It's a time for truth. Secret activity, especially illegal secret activity, is like scorpions and cockroaches. You turn the light on and they can't handle it, man. They scramble for the nearest bookshelf or what, right? So it is with government. The Founding Fathers wrote document after document after document saying the Constitution was created to protect the people from the tyranny of government because government will go evil every time. That's its nature. The Bill of Rights was not written to govern the people. It was written to protect the people from the tyranny of government. That's the whole reason it was written. Courageous people like Dane, Geoengineering Watch. Does that look like a normal sky to you? God bless Dane for what he's doing. You know, he is doing this out of character, really. Raw courage and character at personal sacrifice. And I'll have to tell you, Dane is the one that got me to come back in from the wilderness, from off the grid, because I had seen this go up to such high levels, and I know some of the penetrations in the media. I had just had it. So I went off building my little off-the-grid farm and put up our solar panels, and I think Dane worked me over for a couple of months. And finally I said, you know, this guy's really a man of integrity, and I'll do it. And that's why I'm here, honestly. It's because of Dane. So I thank you, Dane. I appreciate that. Amen. I have to sit, my wife and I have to sit on our beautiful off-the-grid farm, get up in the morning, and we have to see this sky over Vidalia, Georgia. What used to be a beautiful blue sky, we have to sit there and watch this on a Monday, 94 degrees centigrade, 9 o'clock in the morning. Tuesday morning, it's not there. All those trails are gone. There's an ongoing joke I have with my wife. I'll lean to Sue and I'll say, man, it looks like they canceled all the traffic, air traffic over Georgia. There's no condensation anywhere. You see what a joke that is? One day, the laws of physics are one way, and the next day, all the laws of physics change. One day, there's trails. The next day, they canceled all the flights over Georgia. Come on, how ridiculous can it get? But it ruins our skyline. I went off the grid out in the wilderness to get away from government tyranny and all the ugliness I've seen, and now I have to sit on my front porch and see them do it again in the sky. We have got to bring the truth in about autism. There are kids suffering. It is now, by all scientists read, it is an epidemic, exponential epidemic. This is so serious. We've got to stop accepting the intimidation, the career destruction, the attacks on reputation, and I've got to give the vax people, I love people that have the guts and the courage to take the heat that the establishment is throwing at them and keep going anyway. Call me what you want, pal. I'm going to keep going, and nothing's going to stop me. That's what they're doing. And you don't know how refreshing it is for me to see that, having kind of been alone for several years in this. All right, we have got to stop government's tyrannical overreach of our entire lives. They've been following, bugging, and eavesdropping on every single thing that we do for way too long. They've been scaring us and intimidating us into not rocking the boat for way too long. I like to put it this way. You got a neighbor who comes to you and says, hey, two guys from the Lions Club were knocked on my door. They're asking questions about you. Okay, no big deal. What if that neighbor comes to you and says, hey man, two guys from the CIA knocked on my door and they're asking questions about it. How are you going to feel? What are you going to feel? Fear. That's their weapon. Another analogy I like to use is these agencies, the CIA and others, are like the Wizard of Oz. Remember that movie? I'm big, powerful Oz. Lightning bolts shooting out of it. You will not mess with me or you will be destroyed. And then the dog pulls the curtain away and there's this little tiny guy in there working the levers. That's our government. They want us to be scared of them with this big, mean face, but they're a bunch of little tiny bureaucrats pulling levers trying to make you afraid of them, and that's how they do it. What do we have? What do we need to bring back is this. We, the people, are supposed to run our government, not the other way around. They are supposed to work for us, not us for them. And the only thing that's going to change this is courage. People like many of you out there that are standing up and saying, enough is enough, not anymore, not my country, you don't, not my Constitution, you don't. I want to leave you with one final thought. Please remember this, because this is what it all comes down to. I learned this personally. As long as I feared them covering up this case, not only were they winning, they were breaking into my house, they were drugging my dog, they were painting chemicals on the ceiling. But once I decided I'm not going to be afraid of you anymore, I'm coming out full bore, and I'm coming out against you full bore all the way, that's when things started to work on our side. And that's when we started to win, and that's how we got the book out. When I made that decision, I will not fear you, the last thing I told them was this, and then I'll put this quote up. Last thing I said to them, I said, the same courage that made me a good CIA officer here with you is the same courage that is enabling me to stand up against you now. And that's the last thing I told them before I walked out the door. And they know it. So I want you to remember this as I close. When people fear their government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, when they fear you, there's liberty.